Welcome to our panel, Green Stars, How BC Film Industry Influencers Are Changing Behaviors and Reducing Our Carbon Footprint, presented by Real Green at Creative BC, thanks to our incredible host, Vancouver International Film Festival. I would like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from my home on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam Nations. In this conversation today, we are going behind the scenes with Real Green with this incredible lineup of speakers to learn more about our environmental impact and how we can use our voice and roles to empower and transition towards an environmentally sustainable industry. It is not a one-person job. It takes everybody, from studios to film commissions to cast, crew, writers, directors, and producers. Climate change is not a foreign subject matter. We are experiencing the effects on our communities and neighbors here in British Columbia, with this year alone seeing the wildfires and heat waves. And the motion picture industry plays a large role in shifting our culture and behaviors, with how we make our productions all the way to what we share on screen. I'm Smiley Crenna, the Real Green Sustainability Lead, working with the BC Film Commission at Creative BC. I work directly with productions, studios, labor organizations, industry stakeholders, and the community to lead sustainability expectations and practices in the motion picture industry. Real Green is committed to providing the tools, resources, and support to work towards a circular economy. Today, I am joined by my friends who are championing environmental sustainability in their respective roles and will, by the end of this talk, inspire you to go do the same. With that being said, on to the incredible panelists. First up, we have Rekha Sharma, actress best known for her roles in Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek. Next is Zach Leplasky, director and DGC's National Director Division Chair, most known for his successful award-winning film Freaks. And we have the wonderful Candice McClure, actress known for her roles in Battlestar Galactica and CW's Charmed. And last but not least, my friend Hans Dale, production manager and location manager, also chair of the DGC BC Sustainable Climate Action Committee. Now, I'd love to stop talking and hear from all you wonderful humans. I want to go around and ask if you can each share a little bit about your background and possibly what sustainability means or looks like to you. So how about we start with Zach?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to chat. I think I've been writing and directing and producing movies for a long time, and it's been really exciting to see the shift in the last few years about really taking sort of sustainability seriously and seeing how actually achievable it is in a wide variety of ways. On the shows I've been on, we've been able to make some great impacts and on a lot of little ways that are just incredibly wasteful that the film industry just got used to doing that were really not that hard to change, which we can get more into. More recently, the things I've been sort of thinking about, which I was sort of surprised that I hadn't been thinking about, was the on-screen side of it, showing characters and that are making sustainable choices and kind of forwarding the sustainable narrative just through the everyday things that the characters are doing on screen, the types of with the way that they're drinking water, the way that they're driving their car, all that type of stuff also does have an impact. And so I've been really interested in sort of not only how to make the sets greener, but also how to infuse that message into the content. Because we always, I've done a lot of work with Disney and we do a lot of thinking about the type of violence that we show and the type of habits that we show. And now it's starting to be a thing where you're starting to think about also the ecological habits that the characters have, which I think is really great.
Amazing. Yeah. And that's something we will get into, but definitely how we normalize these practices and just our culture on screen. And amazing. Rekha, how about yourself?
I'd like to add a little bit to that. But first I'll say, hello, I'm Rekha. And in terms of like who I am, my background, you all know that I'm an actor, but it just occurred to me that maybe it's useful to talk a little bit about my cultural background in terms of my relationship with sustainability. Being an Indian person of Fijian descent, I was born in Canada, but my family came from the Fiji Islands. I just grew up with some kind of real like grassroots ways of being where wastefulness was not acceptable in our family growing up. If you got Ziploc bags, you wash them and you reuse them over and over again. And I've done that my whole life. Now there's great other choices besides Ziploc bags, but there are many, many cultures in the world that I think are naturally more sustainably inclined than the Western world, especially capitalist sort of North America. And so I just thought it'd be useful to start with that. You know, there's lots of practices that we can do that people have been doing in Europe and other parts of the world for a long time. It's not that new, I guess, right? Our grandparents all knew how to live more sustainably. We just got weird recently. And I love, Zach, what you were saying about the storytelling, the narrative. I just working on a show right now I can't talk about, but I just read a script where the characters are talking about eating a burger. And one of them's like, but isn't it rude to like put the milk of the mother on the, like to dress the milk of the mother on the patty because it was a cheeseburger. And it was just great. Like it was so funny and clever and poignant. And I would love to see more and more things like that worked into the stories. I think it's great. There's an opportunity there to talk about things that the way we want to see them, and in a way that's engaging, because you know we're good at storytelling, right? That's why we do this. Let's use that. I'll start with that.
I love that. Thank you, Reka.
Yeah.
Hunt, how about you?
Oh, okay. Well, I forget the question now because I'm just lost in my grandmother's old. I too come from that same background. I feel like Zach, we're ganging up on Zach today, but I was just kind of getting lost in that a little bit. It made me think of does everyone know Dr. Wade Davis, the cultural anthropologist that's at UBC, who talks a lot about ancient cultures and how older cultures are so much better, to your point, Rick, of keeping, you know, sustainability was, it was necessary for them to thrive, but there's lessons there that we're now losing because those cultures are disappearing. So I think that that's another part of it. But really, to talk about film and what we do, you know, I've been a location manager, production manager in BC. I came out here in the 90s to enjoy the forests, and I'm watching as our carbon footprint increases year in, year out in Canada, and it really gets me anxious as a parent, and then as someone who watches, you know, tons and tons of carbon emissions spewed into the sky from our generators at work. And I don't want to feel bad about what I do for a living, but I think as time goes on, I'd like to feel good about the contribution that we can make. And I also want to present to the world at large. Part of being a location manager has always been presenting our business as something that's kind of a noble pursuit. And I think the arts, and even though there's a commercial bent to everything that we do, the arts is the best idea factory in the world, you know, or in our culture, in our universe. And I think that the best ideas come from the arts. So I think that the most creative people have landed in the film industry because it's such a all-encompassing art form. And I would love to see that application put into practice in the actual process of making shows. I've seen it done. I've seen us reduce a lot of our food. You know, we've done a lot with recycling and food in the last 15 years or so here in BC, and we're at the kind of the forefront of it internationally, which is great. But carbon emissions and fuel consumption and kind of trying to get to zero emissions for our business is very ambitious, because we do need a lot of power and we need to sustain ourselves. So I'd like to get more active on that particular you know, track of sustainability. And that's where I see myself as a sort of a senior member at mid-level. I'm not a creative purely, so I have to balance the needs of the crews and the studios, or the infrastructure versus the creative requirements. So I leave the creative things to people like Rika and Candace and Zach to lobby for. But at the crew level, I think we can lobby for, trying to find places where we can tie into the grid and not burn fuel and generators, try to go paperless, try to monitor our food usage, try to consume less, try to consume so much more less. If I can make that argument, we are not active enough and we're not vocal enough, I think, as crew members. And I think that it's ironic that we're starting to see a real swing through COVID for the crews to start to get very vocal about what they want in a very, obviously, we're on the cusp of potentially some real labor disruption here. And I think the quality of life, that's a part of their quality of life. They want to see the world not burn, and they know that they're participating in that. So how do we give them tools and resources to help them get through that? Anyways, that's a quick summary. I don't know if that's too much.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
I already know this is going to be such a good panel. Thanks, Hans. Candace.
Thank you to everybody, because now I just get to agree with every single one of you, and you're going to make me sound really good. My name is Candace. As you said, I am an actor. I've been in the business for, almost 25 years. I've taken the opportunity to work on other sides of the business besides acting. I love all the parts of it. I think it's such a collaborative space, and that's one of the things that makes me most excited about being it. As Rika was saying, I was born in South Africa. I'm an immigrant to Canada. My mother and I immigrated to BC in the 90s. And there's just a certain kind of way of being in the world that I was raised in. And sometimes when I was a teenager, embarrassed about, because it's labeled as other things, maybe thriftiness or cheapness or all these kinds of things. There was never a butter container that didn't go unused for leftovers, or yogurt container. And it's just something that I've carried through with me into my work. Sustainability means trying to be an example of those things, and in a way, really embracing the way that I was raised, and even some of its challenges. And as Hans was saying, I've always felt this kind of split personality, because there's the way I exist at home, reusing yogurt containers, and I will go all the way out on a limb here, my bath water, and growing gardens. But then when I went to work, it was just this place of excess, and single use and disposability. And I'm really encouraged to see how that's changing. The compost on set, and just little choices that we're able to make, bringing our canisters with us everywhere and having water stations to fill up. Those little things, it's helped me integrate kind of these two parts of myself and sort of feel like I'm living truthfully in both places in my life. So I'm encouraged to see where we can do more and better. And quality of life is a real thing. I don't think it should just be for the above the line. I think everybody on set should have that quality of life, and environmental stewardship and sustainability, I think, really goes hand in hand with that for all of us. So yes, I agree with everyone. Go back to Zach. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Candace. And, already from the beginning of this, just what was supposed to be an introduction has been such a well-rounded, like we've covered everything, like how interconnected all of this is culturally, on screen, the tools we need from, behind the screens. Like that's what I said in the introduction as well, is that it requires everybody. It's not a one-man job, one-person job. It needs every single person's, contribution, advocacy, and that's how we make real change. And I would love to get into our specific roles, because we have such a well-rounded panel today with a diverse group. How are you using your role to empower more change on production? And I know each of you personally, I've known like the actions you've taken and how much it's transpired. So I'd love to start with Zach of, one of the many things you've done, but maybe an example that you've used.
I've come at it from many different places. First of all, I was always a pretty big nerd. So I way before it was cool, I was living a paperless life to the point where most people thought I was pretty strange. But I've been able to mostly, through the use of awesome software. I mean, it wasn't just to reduce paper. It was because I always thought it was actually better than using paper, because there's a lot of benefits to using technology in the ways that it can constantly be updated, whereas paper is, as soon as you print it out, it's out of date. And so one big part of my role as a director is that it's, and sort of as a producer and as a writer, is I'm usually at the very beginning of the stage of when a production is set up, which is a very helpful place to be when you're trying to set the culture. It's a little bit different when you dive into a show as a director and you're just coming on as an episodic director. But when you're there doing the pilot, or you're doing a movie, or you're creating a show, you are right at the very beginning of the culture. And so you can sort of set up the culture in whichever way you think would be best to have a really positive experience. And so I've always tried to use that position as a place to make the show as paperless as possible, make it as green as possible, hire friendly, happy people, and make the experience something where everyone who's hired is hired sort of knowing the type of ecosystem they're coming into, that we let them know that the show has certain priorities, that you're going to need to bring a water bottle, that there's you're going to have actual cutlery at lunch that you then have to put away and is going to get washed, and it won't be disposable. And those types of things the more they happen as people are onboarded onto a show, the easier it is, rather than trying to turn a ship once it's already happened. And then just in small ways, the biggest impact I've seen on sets, and I've told this story before, but it was one that made a real big impact on me, which was I was on a show where the director of photography, who's in charge of the whole camera team, came to set with a reusable container for his lunch. This was on a show that didn't have cutlery and plates. And then the next day, the whole camera team came with reusable containers, probably because their boss was doing it. So they all suddenly were like, okay, I guess we better get in line with our boss. And it was really powerful every lunch to see most of the crew eating on their paper plates and takeout stuff and throwing everything away. And just having the 10 people of the camera department eating out of reusable stuff, everyone would kind of look at it and go, huh, I hadn't really thought about that. Or, and it didn't change the show. It wasn't every single person suddenly brought their own things, but sort of one person made that decision and it spread to their department. And every day at lunch, everyone had to kind of look at that and realize that that was a better way of doing things. And then by the next show, everyone, we'd figured out a way where we could just have reusable stuff for everyone. And so that made me really realize the power of just really an individual of making choices that over the areas where you do have control. Because obviously film set is a very collaborative place and you don't have the ability to control everything, but you do have some influence over the part of the production that you're in charge of. And just by making changes in those areas, in my position, I can pick the software we're using, and I can start to influence the producers to make some better choices. I can also influence the creative, and I can make creative choices that require less lights, or require less vehicles, or whatever the case may be, as well as, like I said before, show sort of sustainably positive portrayals on camera. That's where I have influence, and the hope is that as you make change in the areas where you have influence, that then other people will sort of be influenced by that and make their own choices. And I've seen that to be true. So, it's really fun to kind of learn all the different ways that everyone is finding ways of being sustainable and borrowing the ones that make sense for you. And then as a group, everyone kind of gets on board.
I definitely agree. Thank you for sharing that story too. And I think from personal experience, I've seen that as well. It's that when people realize like it's not as hard as it seems, or it's not as complicated as it makes out to be, it's super easy to follow along, and then you're part of this better cause, and it brings people together, and it's a win at the end of the day for everyone. So those little actions do go a long way. Rika, how about yourself?
Yeah, there's lots of little things that I do like that on set, and it's tricky now. And I'm curious to ask you, Zach, was this show during COVID?
So those two shows were before COVID. I've been on a few shows since COVID, and yeah, it's definitely a lot tougher to be sustainable when, for safety reasons, everyone's sort of using disposable situations. But there's still water stations that they're not using water bottles; they're using water stations that are foot operated, so that you can just put your water bottle up to it. Things like that. But COVID has definitely put a pause button on some of the bigger things that were in progress.
Maybe that a good lesson though out of the COVID experience, I keep hoping, is not that I want to interject here, but I just thought I'd throw this thought out there, is that we now know that we're capable of very drastic change in the way we do things very quickly. And we were able to integrate these protocols in a matter of months and it was global. So when you have this planetary shift on how filmmaking's done, and it happens in 4 months, if we can only elevate this, not that I'm trying to diminish from the COVID pandemic at all, but if we can elevate this, the climate impact conversation to that level of urgency, which we're talking about it like it's a climate emergency, which it is, maybe we can make some real substantial changes in a very short amount of time and influence our workflow, that way. I think that's got to be a lesson that we're all reminded of, I hope, around what this means for us. And I'll be one of those people that will wave that flag and hold that banner up and say, look, we just did it for COVID. We can do this for the planet, for the other side of science that half the people out there don't want to listen to, but should probably.
Absolutely.
Anyway, sorry, I jumped in there.
They're probably not watching, Hans.
No, and that does go to another point about it being sometimes an echo chamber. Like we're all I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that, but it's how do we engage those other, for me, it's engaging those crew members on set that don't buy it, and they say like things like, well, I'll let Rika go, and we can come back to how the crew pushes back, or how people push back, because I think that's a big topic.
I love that, Hans, and I love that point of how quickly we can make change, and also how strong the impact was. I think we were all blown away that, hey, like in that first few months, how wildlife and the air quality was like so doing better without all those cars on the road. So we not only know how quickly we can do it, we also know how incredible the impact can really be. So yeah, I don't know how to tackle, I'm not an expert environmentally, but there are experts, and I bet you they have some great ideas about how to keep things both safe, germ-wise, and sustainable. I do see that things are, trying to get back. Like at first, there was a lot of single-use plastic on sets during COVID, and then people sort of graduated to using water stations again. And there's lots of little things that I've done myself, like taking reusable containers. And now that I can't because of the COVID rules, I'm at least taking my own cutlery. I'm like, you can't force me to use cutlery. I'm gonna wash my own. And of course I take my own water bottle, which I fill up at home, just in case there isn't a water station on set. And one of the shows that I worked on this summer, which I can actually talk about because the trailer's out, Yellow Jackets, when I arrived to that set, it was a single-use plastic water bottle situation. And I was shocked to see that. And by then I had met Smiley. So I had an in, and I talked to some ADs on set, and kind of chummied it up with them about how awful it is that we were doing this, and a few conversations led me to getting in touch with the production manager and feeling her out and seeing if she would be open to a conversation, and she was. So I did an email intro to Smiley, and within 24 hours all single-use water bottles were banned from set. And the next day that I came to set, and I'm a guest on the show, I have to say, this is a very important detail because I'm not number 1 on the call sheet. No, I'm number 41 on the call sheet. So that was a big lesson for me. It was like, oh, it doesn't actually matter if you're the small guy, our voice matters. Because who am I, number 41 on their show? That was a few emails, that was a few conversations. It was the easiest thing in the world, and it was just like the production managers probably just hadn't thought of it, didn't know that there was another option.
Yeah, it's always like that.
I can attest that I know this year, especially in the last year, there's days where you just don't have the bandwidth, and if someone comes up with a great idea, you're just like, run with that, go with that. If you want me to do something, I'll help you out, but I just can't process, what you're asking me right now. And so that's absolutely. And so number 1 or 41, it's like great ideas they abound.
Yeah.
One thing that COVID did
set up, like to be able to connect them to somebody who already has it all figured out.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's the other show that I worked on. This is what they do. And then just boom, they just implement the same strategies. All of a sudden there was recycling, compost, all the bins were there the next day that I went to set. It was like a completely different set. It was amazing.
Honestly, we've given Smiley a lot more work.
What's that?
We've given her a lot more work now. She's not sending
I
everyone to her.
I want to add that although Rekha did introduce me to the production manager, they banned all single-use plastics before I even had that meeting with them. Meaning, like, it was just that one initial, like, Rekha was like, I have this thought, I have this issue. Why do we have plastic water bottles? And they banned it before I even met. And then they did have a meeting with me, and we discussed how much more they can do. But it's literally what Rekha said. It's every voice matters. Like, you just need to speak up and look at what can happen. And so cool.
It was honestly,
the one I was gonna say,
I think it was the feeling that when it happened was like, I think this is the greatest accomplishment of my life. It really felt like that. I think it is.
I don't think
everyone listening can have that feeling.
I think there's more yet to come from.
We're just getting started.
Yeah.
Once we get rid of all the generators, then that'll be the true victory. The one thing that COVID did do that was a positive is sort of force paperlessness.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of all productions in a major way, completely changed the way they were dealing with paper. And it immediately became sort of a no paper zone unless absolutely necessary, which I knew all along was totally possible. But now that paper could potentially have a deadly virus on it, it suddenly became very easy for everyone to deal with. And so that was a good thing, something I hope stays.
Yeah, which ironically, we still are waiting to get the final verdict on whether or not paper actually transfers. Like, science doesn't support that paper is a medium for this to get around, but oh well, we'll take advantage of it, right? Let's take advantage of it. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's sorry to interrupt, but like, yeah, I worked on shows before COVID where I was trying to get the production to go paperless and bring up all these, Zach has an amazing app, Shotlister, that he launched years ago, and it's doing really well. And there's Circus and Scriptation, like amazing programs that exist that are very helpful, useful, and beneficial for crew members and productions to use. And I remember trying to pitch these, and it was just, I would get that hesitation. Oh, we don't have time to learn a new tool, or no, this is what we're used to, or old habits die hard. And then the pandemic happened, and how everything changed overnight, and it was that simple. And so again, it's just that we can make that change. We just have to take that initiative, and we may be investment of a little bit of time, but.
One thing I've done, in case anyone's in this position, is on the shows where I'm instituting a new piece of software that nobody wants to use. I have the ADs set a meeting for the 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. every Monday morning for everyone who's just been hired that week. And we go over all the software and show them how to use it and put it on their device and answer their questions. It's basically like a personal tech teaching, because a lot of time it's people fearful of not knowing how to use it and being embarrassed that they don't know how to use it and not being able to ask those questions. And so we have like a 9 a.m. Monday tech walkthrough for, they've just signed their paperwork. They walk into this room with me and I'm like, all right, where's your phone? Where's your iPad? let's do this and get everyone up to speed that way so that everyone can benefit from it. And that's been one way of onboarding everyone in a way, so that it's not just throwing them into the deep end.
I'm just going to jump in just while I'm thinking about another little thing that I do that, you know, can, like Candace was saying, you know, we come from cultures where some of our practices can be considered like being cheap or whatever, thrifty. But, you know, there's a reason most of our parents said, turn off the lights if you're not using them and turn down the heat because of costs, you know, but like the fact that most people leave their lights on in their trailer and the AC or the heat pumping all day long. And it's like, you don't think about it. Why? Just because you're not footing the bill? Who is footing the bill? The planet, which is our home. So you are footing the bill. So yeah, I try to, as much as possible, make sure those lights are turned off and the heat or the AC is turned off. You know, when you get back to your trailer, and if it's really hot, it takes like 5 minutes for the thing to cool down. If you put it on, you're not in there for like 8 hours at a time. There's ways. And actually, I'm in a trailer now that's very new and fancy, and it's hooked up to Alexa. And it just naturally, as soon as you leave, it turns everything off. So again, there are ways where the new tech can help us to save the environment instead
of.
Yeah,
and if you don't have Alexa, you can also just tell the Teamsters or the ADs that are there. Like one of the things that's in the stuff that we're doing at the Directors Guild on some of the committees that Hans is on and that we're helping doing nationally, we have these handbooks for crew, and in there it's for directors, because directors are in their trailer even less than actors. Like maybe for 20 minutes at lunch, you're in your trailer and it's there all day with the lights on and the heat on. And in there, it just says, tell the Teamsters or tell whoever is in charge of the circus that you're only going to be in there for 20 minute window. And just ask them to turn on that stuff before you get there and turn it off after, you can turn it off after you leave. But if you really want it warm when you arrive, just tell them to turn it on 20 minutes before they know when lunch is going to happen. And someone can go in there and do that so that it's, there's no inconvenience to you, yet it's off for the rest of the time.
I've taken that a step further, Zach, not to be that guy, which the job entails that I'm going to be. But before some episodes, I've asked directors, when they're coming in just to shoot the one episode from LA or wherever it is, do you actually need a trailer? Do we need to tote this thing around for you? Because sometimes if I don't carry that one, like it's a 3-banger trailer, if I don't need that 1/3 of a trailer, that's one less vehicle that's on the road. So those are all questions that we can ask our folks. And I think it's like, those are the questions that we want to ask. Like, that's what I was going to say for me, not to jump in again, but Clara Hughes, who's one of our big proponents here in our world, often says and uses the language of the sustainability lens. If we can add that lens to all the questions that we asked about a show, I think that's a crucial concept for us. And I think that as ambassadors, no matter what our role or situation is, we have to just go out and say, hey, just ask that question about sustainability. What is the impact? How much is that going to, who is paying the bill? Who is footing the bill? And just because it's not you doesn't mean that it shouldn't be thought of, and think about it through that lens of sustainability, because a lot can happen really quickly just if we're just asking those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Yeah, no, and I love that we're bringing all this up because we talked about COVID and the pandemic, and these are things that have nothing to do with the pandemic. This is everyday stuff that we are using in our industry, regardless of a global pandemic or not. Our energy use, our power, clean power, like these are questions that we should be asking people. Like, this is stuff we could be doing already anyways, and we are seeing that, and we're seeing the effect and the impact of that. So it's good that we're talking about this, because when we do get that resistance, which is something we'll get into later in the conversation about conflict, but I've heard personally, oh, it's hard to go sustainable because single-use items, we can't use reusables, so we can't go green. Like I get that a lot, and that's something we're trying to get out of it. If that's one component, but there's this larger picture that we can't ignore, and so it's good that we're bringing it up. But yeah, I'd love to get to Candace now.
Oh, yeah, I was just sitting here thinking about the notion of modeling behavior. You know, I think as storytellers, that's a real powerful tool that we have to shift people's consciousness and just keep feeding them this image of what is possible and what is normal, or it could be considered as normal. And yeah, I mean, I'm really inspired by Reika's number 41 on the call sheet request to the PM. I will try it on my next show. I think I'm 27 on the next one. So I'm a little higher up than you, get more done. But yeah, I mean, it's just modeling behavior. And it's, again, it's something that's just a part of me holding on to my own cultural heritage. I always travel with my stuff to work. I'm a bit of a brat about the water bottles and the recycling and the compost. I do ask about the compost and the recycling. I am the person who picks the water bottles out of the garbage and puts them in the recycling. And then Tad runs over and goes, please don't do that. We will do that later. I'm like, now you will do it later. Wardrobe, I think, is something I love the wardrobe department, mainly because I love clothes, but I always offer to bring my own shoes. I'll bring wardrobe items in that I think are fitting for the camera. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my character's a lot wealthier and wants to spend money on more expensive clothes. Yeah. Just modeling behavior and making it okay for somebody else to try it as well. Because I think that's also, people don't really want to stand out, you know, or cause problems, or be singled out, or yeah, be seen as difficult or whatever. But sometimes we can do that because it'll set a great example. And I try and do that as much as I can. I recently just kind of put 2 and 2 together about the trailers. Literally, I was sitting on the stair of my trailer. The Teamster came by and saw me and went, hey, you're probably really warm in there. Do you want me to turn the AC on? And I was like, no, it's okay. I'll leave the door open. And he was like, great, I won't have to turn the generator on, because I was in a separate unit where I was the only person in that trailer. And I was like, oh, he would have to have turned on an entire generator just for me in this one room. And had there been anybody else in that room and not just the storyboards, it probably would have been running, you know, the whole day. And I hadn't thought of that before, actually. I do just turn everything off when I leave, because that's how I am in my house. And I just set as my home. So I treat it the same way as I do my house. But yeah, it's all about these places where things can intersect. We can't use reusable things for food all the time, but we can use compostable cartons, and we can put them in the compost. Literally every set I've been on this year has had compost on it, and I love that. I would like to say, though, that shooting in sets in other places in the world where there aren't recycling programs, and it being really infuriating, but I was in Mexico City and sort of having this conversation about recycling and stuff. And the pushback that I got was, we don't have that here because we have this. And what it was garbage pickers, essentially. There was this entire strata of the society who took wealth out of what everybody else threw away. And they did a remarkable job in sorting everything out into what was usable and what was sellable, and reducing actually what went to the landfill. And while I'm, of course, not advocating for that kind of caste system anywhere, it's about finding, like, I don't know, where that granular place where human nature and altruism and business interest and better ways of doing things, living with technology, living within community, kind of find their way into what we do. And I think there's more room for it. I think people, young people especially, want to see that their values reflected in this way. and they're more curious. I'm more curious. It's not just about how it's represented on screen, although it's great to be able to see myself there, that she goes vintage shopping or, carries her tote, but also that I can feel good about how that product was made and my complicity in engaging with it. Am I supporting something that really aligns with my values, even though I'm being entertained? I can feel good about it in all these other ways.
Can I ask a question? I wanted to go back, Candace. I'm sorry to interrupt here, Smiley, but I think it's a real curious thing that you said that about other cultures and how they do things differently. And as someone that's straddled two cultures all my life as well, I always feel like, well, there's things that work here. Like we were always taught in my home that, you're lucky that you're from two worlds because you can take the best of both worlds and apply them, right? I don't know if anyone else's parents told them that, but I've loved that, and I've tried to put that into my kids, though they are, a generation removed. But I think that sometimes we forget that some things are just culturally specific, and that's okay so long as the end result is kind of the same thing, right? It's like it's so easy to judge how someone else does something and slam it, but when you're thinking about something with real authority and understanding their process, it just all of a sudden this answer is right there, that, oh my gosh, yeah, there is this whole other group of people, and we don't want to have like you said, a caste system or a class system or whatever here, but for that world it works, and it seems to work really well. I always want to say to people, you can apply. That's the great thing about living in Canada. Not to tote the multicultural flag on this one, but we can benefit from all these other cultures that have these ideas, and primarily, and start with the First Nations, who are such stewards of the environment and our natural environment in Canada. We don't tap that resource well enough. I was listening to a great interview about the fires in Lytton, and the fire forest there from the band's fire team actually curbed the fire growth and spread because they applied old techniques of how to manage the forest, because they understood the forest. And we forget about things like that. And I wonder all the time how we can learn more about that, and how we can engage our elders from other cultures to inform how we manage our resources and sustain them here in our business. Anyways, that was just a thought.
I was thinking,
What's that? Sorry, Zach?
I was thinking, Hans, can you talk a bit more about the generator side of things, like what Candace was mentioning about the generator? I personally think that like almost everything we've talked about has been on the reduce and reuse way of like the all of the sides of things that we interact with every day. And the generators are kind of invisible, like they're even built to be silent, but they really are by far the biggest impact that a film set makes by a massive, massive amount. Can you talk about maybe the impact, the research on that, and what can be done about that? Because I know you've done a lot of thinking about that.
Yeah, so both Smiley and I, and you're new to it, but we've had a committee through Creative BC and the Real Green program here in the province around clean power, which means tapping into the hydro grid as opposed to running generators. And we're just really getting our legs with it, because now people are starting to really understand that you can tie in very simply in a lot of places and not have to run this many generators. The City of Vancouver has been very supportive and is actually offering rebates on their filming permit fees to companies that can basically prove, or not really, they don't even have to really prove it. I think they just have to ask for it and say, look, we're running a tie-in here, we're eliminating generators, then you get a break on your permit fees. These kinds of incentive programs are the things we're hoping will help us move closer, because literally by 2030, there will be heavy costs for our vehicles to run on fuel and not be zero carbon emitting vehicles in the City of Vancouver, for example. So that move is taking place, and our industry has to be responding. I think that the suppliers are doing a pretty good job of trying to build zero carbon emitting generators, so they won't burn fuel, or they may burn recycled diesel or things like that, like bio waste can also be converted into fuel. There's lots of conversations. Hydrogen, they're talking about a lot of different technologies. Right now, we're still using the car batteries like we're used to. They're just rejiggering them to be like a generator. So to go to the science, Zach, I think the number, if I'm not right, and you can correct me, Smiley, I think it's 300 tons of carbon carbon emissions that we emit per day per generator. Is that right? It's an arbitrary number, and these are the numbers that I try not to really get too caught up in. All I know is that we're emitting this, about 70% of the harm that we cause as an industry comes from burning fuel. So whether it's the generators to fuel our lights or to run around town or to, go and buy all the costumes or all that stuff, that's where the biggest impact can be made. So you're absolutely right that generators are the key for our business generally. So to add to what we think that we should be pursuing is encouraging, and all these other things are wonderful, reducing waste, reducing consumption, going paperless, using technology. Obviously, all of those ideas are going to land us in that right spot. But I think the priority or the big push right now is to get ourselves off of carbon, emitting fuels. And the best way I think for us to do that is to find technology, for example, that helps us get out of that situation. I'll give you an example. So on your shows, your electrical teams, a lot of them are old school in the way that they light. And so they're using lights that consume a lot of power, A, and B, the way that they are getting that power sourced often is not a tie-in. So one thing that you could always ask or inquire about or push for when you're working is, hey, are we able to tie in at this location? Are we tying in? Are we able to get access to an electrical panel and actually plug ourselves into the grid via this location or via some port in this location? We're trying as a community, we'll have maps that will allow us to show and share with the community, the lighting departments in the city, for example, where tie-ins exist and where we've used them. And we'd love to grow that information, because the more information and facility we have for that, the easier it is for us to sell it to people who don't know that it exists or don't know how to do it, right? That's a question we can ask. A lot of times now we're seeing a lot of our equipment changeover. A lot of the suppliers are starting to bring in these electrical generators. They're even quieter, which we love, because that means that they can sit closer to set and they don't, we can't even hear the hum of the exhaust. But they're also cleaner, and they're basically just giant rolling batteries. We'd love to see that stuff happen all across the board. So the suppliers can be pressured by all of you. Like, it doesn't matter if you're on the call sheet, front of the call sheet, back of the call sheet, everybody asking these questions, not just of their unions, not just of people like us, but of the people that are the hard sell, I think is the place to go with it. Because I think that once people who don't want to change are asked the question by people like yourselves, who are prominent, and you're more than likely on the front of the call sheet, I think that does give you a little bit more authority to be able to push for us and advocate for us in the trenches to say, hey, can we find out, is this tied in? What are we burning here? All those questions that you can ask about that helps us push the bar higher and further along. The suppliers do need to be, hand in hand with the industry. So if you guys are asking for it, then that helps us advocate and push them on the other side too, on committees and in other contexts.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that answers any of your questions, Zach, but. Oh, you're muted, my friend.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted people to realize how big the generators are, like that it's really, that is sort of the biggest thing to figure out.
Yeah, it's all fuel, and I don't want to just limit it to generators, but if I was to take 100% of my fuel, how much I consume on a show, a good 70% of that will be the generators. There's still the other 30%, right? Which is people using cars that use fuel. You guys that are above the line when you get your car rentals or whatever it is, ask for and push for those electrical vehicles. There's probably more than likely some facility at this point with most studio facilities, or there's very easy. I ordered 2 portable kits from Amazon for our unit, so that no matter where we were shooting, you could plug into a generator and cars could park up against next to the generator and tie into it to charge their cars. So the technology is coming, and it's just a matter of time. But the more we advocate for it, the better I think it is. So it's not to take away from the generator thing, but any fuel consumption right now should be the priority. Anything that you can do. I'll take 1%.
No, and I'd like to add to that, we have resources like Hans mentioned, the generator, we have maps, we have tie-in grid maps, so realgreen.ca, you're able to go on there and this is something you share with your production, and it requires it's a team effort. You need your locations team, your electrics team, your producers all on this, and anyone can speak up for it as well. So we have like maps where you're able to pinpoint exactly where there are tie-in availables, and then where you plugging generators, and then that gives us information on working with the municipalities on creating more technology. So thanks, Hans. That was a good brief overview of the mass contribution it requires. And I'd also love to just share a little bit about what Real Green is launching as well, and this connects with everything that we've been talking about and what Candice mentioned about really modeling these examples. Is what we're launching is called a Green Rider. So it's not brand new. We've seen this out in the UK, but we're trying to launch it here in North America. And the Green Rider supports whoever would like to adopt it, whether it's actors, writers, directors, onto their contracts, and adding clauses, adding requests such as, an electric car rental, for example, if you want to go with clean energy, or with your trailer, costumes, ethically sourced costumes or makeup, or it could be as easy as not wanting single-use plastic. So this is a draft template document that we'll be launching as part of a toolkit that supports our actors and our industry members, so that, like what Candice mentioned, you're not seen as the difficult person that's asking for more, or being seen as a diva or anything. It's something that we're all working towards normalizing, and it's for the better of the planet. And like we all said at one point or another in this conversation, we're all winning at the end of the day. So that is something we're launching. You can go check it out on our website at realgreen.ca. And we are coming close to the end of this. So I'd love to just wrap it up with, quick advice that you would give to industry members that are looking to go more sustainable and don't know where to start. And it's maybe start with Zach. What would be your go-to advice?
Well, I was just reacting to what you said. You might need to be a diva. The planet is burning, people. Hello. You might need to not be worried about how you come off, but obviously be respectful. But there is an emergency happening, so time to take it seriously. But beyond that, I think, just like I said before, being aware of that the choices you make, and just by making the choices over the areas that you have control over, have a huge impact. So just being really aware of what are the choices you can make, and make them loud and proud, and have people see that you're making them, and that'll have an impact.
Thank you. Reka.
I would just say, don't be afraid of speaking up. I'm always worried about coming off as a douche, but it's really douchey to not bring it up. If anybody judges you for wanting to make the planet better, even to themselves.
Could I just throw out there that you're not asking for red Smarties, in your deal rider. You're asking to save the planet. It's a pretty urgent, pressing issue. You're not alone on this. We're all in this together. It's not red Smarties. Please fight for it. Fight for all of us. You all have that power.
And might I add, to not to take us away from this, but Hans and I just had a meeting last week, and Hans said one thing that just stood out to me and that I will never forget is, in our industry, we don't say no. So, and I think that's what I've been doing the last few years as well in my job, and trying to coordinate sustainability now in this position, is that if there's a conflict or a barrier, we figure out a solution, and how do we still manage to, get what we need in a different way, whether it's like if COVID happened and we have to use single-use water bottles, let's find a more sustainable material than plastic. Like, there's always a way, and we don't say no in our industry, and so why would we say no to any of these requests or issues or anything?
Let your green freak flag fly. Pick the water bottles out of the garbage. Reuse your cutlery. Say no thank you when they offer you one. Bring your own shoes. That's okay. We're actors. They think we're weird already. So be weirder. Sorry, Hans, you were saying.
No, I was hoping you'd get the last word actually, but I think that to just add to all of that, you know, and add to everything that I would always offer, to Zach's point, this is an emergency. This is very urgent. And so the biggest thing that we didn't arm ourselves with over the years with this conversation was data and information and background. So if people who are very active get involved in learning more about what's going on, then that'll help color their ability to influence decisions at all sorts of levels. If you don't want to be an agent in that sort of heavy active way, and you want to be a light activist, activist light, then knowing where resources are is super helpful. And that's why people like Smiley, or that's why we had established this committee at the Directors Guild, so that there's someone to go to that you can say, hey, I don't know how to start. And I keep saying to people, look, it doesn't matter what little you do, just any little decision that you make. It's just not throwing the food out with the wrapper. It's just making those small choices every day. Everything will help. And that's where we're at, that every little incremental decision that you make is going to be something that helps us. So don't be afraid to do it, because those small choices aren't hard to make. The big choices to go and confront your producers about paper and fuel, that might not be the conversation that you can have or you feel comfortable having. But I think that you can have that decision making for yourself, where you bring your container and you have the information to know that I'm not going to get COVID from having my own container, having my own cutlery, and trying to convince the health and safety manager from whatever studio that's been assigned the show. We all know that it's 60% theatrics and optics at this point, and there's only 40% of it that's really supported by science. So we just have to push and advocate. We're pushy. To Smiley's point about my story about us never saying no, we've been pushy as an industry and as a culture. We have to push because we're so unusual in the mainstream culture to be able to make films, to go into people's neighborhoods and homes and businesses and try and cobble together a 13-hour stupid day to shoot something for entertainment's sake. We're already nutty. So we have to be obnoxious and nutty about this. We have the ability to do that, I think, in the classiest and most elegant ways. So let's exercise that and try. And like I said, and if that's not for you to be upfront about it, you can do it from your own personal choices and just ask for small changes as opposed to, you know, gargantuan ones. It's all going to help. And that's the urgency that we have to, you know, hopefully infect our colleagues with, I hope.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, everybody. No, that was such a powerful note to end this off with as well. Thank you for joining us today, and to our panelists and our audience at BIF. We hope that sparked some more knowledge and has inspired you to go out, take action, be a green champion like our amazing panelists here. You can get involved with Real Green by visiting our website for our toolkits, get involved in our meetings, our committees. We have, you know, a lot happening, and if there's something that you have an idea of, like Hans said, you bring it up, share it, tell us what you're doing, share the word. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in.